My name is Jason, and at 32, I never expected to be publicly humiliated at my perfect sister Rachel's wedding. The grand ballroom fell silent as she grabbed the microphone, her diamond ring catching the light. I should have known she would find a way to put me down, even on her special day. What I never anticipated was how her new husband would react when she mocked me for being a single father to my 7-year-old daughter Emma. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from. Drop a like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family members who treated you unfairly. Rachel is 2 years younger than me, but growing up, that age gap never stopped us from being close. We built pillow forts in the living room, chased fireflies in the summer, and had secret codes only we understood. Our childhood was filled with typical sibling moments, both the fights and the fierce loyalty that came when anyone outside our family tried to mess with either of us. Everything changed when we entered middle school. Rachel started bringing home perfect report cards, joining every club, and winning awards. I was just average, getting BS and CS and preferring to work with my hands rather than memorize textbooks. Our parents, Diane and Robert, noticed the difference. Soon, Rachel became the golden child. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my teenage years. Rachel would win the science fair, and my mother would beam with pride. I would build a functional workbench in shop class, and she would merely nod, asking why I didn't focus on real academics instead. Rachel's path seemed predetermined. She graduated at the top of her class, got accepted to Cornell University with a partial scholarship, and majored in business with a minor in communications. After college, she landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm in Chicago, climbing the corporate ladder with determination and skill. By 28, she was a senior marketing executive with a corner office and a 6-figure salary. My journey took a different direction. After graduating high school with decent grades, I started working at my Uncle Thomas's construction company. I enjoyed the physical work and the satisfaction of building something real. Over the years, I worked my way up from general laborer to site supervisor. The pay was good, and I took pride in my work, even if my family considered it beneath their expectations. When I was 23, I met Melanie at a friend's barbecue. She was smart, funny, and had the most infectious laugh. We fell in love quickly, moving in together after just 6 months. When she got pregnant a year later, it wasn't planned, but I was excited. I proposed, and we started planning a small wedding. Emma was born perfect, with my blue eyes and Melanie's curly brown hair. But parenthood was harder than Melanie expected. She struggled with postpartum depression and felt trapped by the responsibility. I tried to be supportive, taking on extra shifts to provide while also helping with Emma as much as possible, but it wasn't enough. When Emma was 2, I came home from work to find a note. Melanie had left us, claiming she needed to find herself and wasn't cut out to be a mother. The divorce papers arrived a month later, and I never saw her again. She relinquished all parental rights, leaving me as Emma's sole parent. My family's reaction was exactly what you might expect. My mother shook her head and said, "This is what happens when you rush into things. You always were impulsive." My father just looked disappointed, as if my failed marriage confirmed his low expectations of me. Rachel, who was finishing her master's degree at the time, called to say she was sorry, but managed to work and how glad she was that she had focused on her career instead of settling down too early. Despite their judgment, I threw myself into being the best father I could be. I learned to braid hair, attended tea parties with stuffed animals, and mastered the art of removing bubble gum from just about anything. I rearranged my work schedule to be home for dinner every night, read bedtime stories, and never missed a parent-teacher conference. Emma became my whole world, and seeing her happy made every sacrifice worthwhile. As Emma grew, so did the divide between my family and me. Rachel continued her perfect ascent, dating a series of successful men until she met Brandon, a corporate attorney who checked every box on her list. My mother would call weekly to update me on Rachel's accomplishments, rarely asking about Emma or me except to offer unsolicited parenting advice. "You know, Emma really should be in piano lessons by now. Rachel was already playing Mozart at her age," she would say. Conveniently forgetting that piano lessons cost money, I was saving for Emma's college fund instead. The comments grew more pointed over time. When I brought Emma to family gatherings, my mother would pull me aside to ask if I was dating anyone. "That child needs a mother figure," she would insist, as if I hadn't been successfully filling both parental roles for years. Rachel's interactions with me were a mix of condescension disguised as concern. "I found an article about single parents finding time to date. I thought of you." Or, "I could help you update your resume if you ever want to get a real career. My company has great benefits." Through it all, I maintained the relationship because I wanted Emma to know her family, despite their flaws. My father, while never openly critical like my mother, enabled the dynamic through his silence. Occasionally, he would pull me aside to awkwardly pat my shoulder and say, "You're doing all right, son," which was as close to approval as I ever got. Uncle Thomas was my only true ally in the family, having built his construction business from nothing. He respected hard work regardless of what form it took. He was the only one who ever told me he was proud of how I was raising Emma, and the only one who treated her like a treasure rather than a burden. By the time Rachel announced her engagement to Brandon, Emma was 7, and I was 32. We had our routine down perfectly. Our small 2-bedroom apartment filled with love and laughter. Emma was thriving in school, making friends easily, and showing a talent for art that I encouraged with weekly trips to the local community center for free children's classes. We were happy, even if my family couldn't see it. The wedding invitation arrived on a Tuesday in January, 6 months before the scheduled June ceremony. The thick cream envelope with gold embossing practically screamed expensive before I even opened it. Inside, elegant calligraphy announced that Rachel Marie Wilson and Brandon James Harrington requested the honor of my presence at their wedding at the Grand Lake Resort, one of the most exclusive venues in the state. My first instinct was to decline. The thought of spending an entire weekend with my judgmental family, watching them fawn over Rachel while making thinly veiled comments about my life choices, made my stomach knot. But as I stared at the invitation, I thought about the consequences of not attending. It would create a family rift that would never heal, and despite everything, I didn't want that for Emma's sake. When Emma came home from school that day, she noticed the invitation on the counter and asked about it. "Is that from Aunt Rachel? Is she getting married?" Her eyes lit up with excitement. Despite the infrequent and often awkward interactions with my sister, Emma had somehow maintained a childlike admiration for her glamorous aunt. "Yes, sweetheart. Aunt Rachel is marrying Brandon in June," I explained, watching her face carefully. "Will there be a flower girl? Can I be the flower girl?" She twirled around the kitchen, imagining herself in a fancy dress. I hesitated, not wanting to disappoint her. "I don't know, Em. I'll have to ask Aunt Rachel." That evening, I called Rachel to congratulate her and cautiously brought up Emma's request. Her hesitation was palpable. "Oh, I don't know, Jason. We were thinking of asking Brandon's niece Sophia. She's 8 and has taken ballet for years, so she knows how to carry herself properly." The implication that Emma wouldn't know how to carry herself properly stung, but I kept my voice level. "Emma would be really disappointed. She's so excited about you getting married." After a long pause, Rachel sighed. "Let me talk to Brandon. Maybe we could have 2 flower girls." To my surprise, Brandon called me the next day. "Jason, I heard Emma wants to be a flower girl. I think that's a great idea. I already told Rachel we should include her. Family is important to me." It was my first real interaction with Brandon, and I was taken aback by his warmth. I thanked him, And later that night, I told Emma the good news. Her excited dance around our living room made any upcoming family tension seem worthwhile. The next few months were a financial juggling act. A designer outfit for a 7-year-old flower girl wasn't in my budget, nor was the hotel stay at the resort, the gas for the 3-hour drive, or the wedding gift from the couple's high-end registry. I picked up extra weekend shifts, cutting into my time with Emma but necessary to afford everything. Shopping for our wedding attire became an exercise in finding the balance between acceptable and affordable. I finally found Emma a pretty pink dress at a consignment shop that looked new and made her feel like a princess. For myself, I splurged on a new tie to go with the suit I wore to all formal occasions, and spent an evening polishing my dress shoes to a mirror shine. The wedding gift was another challenge. Everything on their registry started at $100 and went up from there. I finally settled on a set of crystal wine glasses that maxed out my credit card but would hopefully meet with approval. 2 weeks before the wedding, Rachel organized a family dinner at our parents' house, supposedly to finalize details but clearly an opportunity for everyone to catch up before the big day. I dreaded it but put on a brave face for Emma's sake. The evening went exactly as expected. My mother fussed over Rachel while barely acknowledging Emma and me. My father sat quietly, occasionally asking about my work but clearly more interested in Brandon's stories about his recent court victory. Rachel alternated between wedding talk and subtle digs about my appearance. "Jason, you are planning to get a proper haircut before the wedding, right? The photographer is costing a fortune, and we want the family photos to look perfect." The only surprise of the evening was Brandon. While Rachel barely interacted with Emma, Brandon made a point of asking her about school and complimenting the drawing she had brought as a gift for her aunt. He seemed genuinely interested, kneeling down to her level and listening intently as she explained her art project in great detail. When he caught me watching their interaction, he smiled and shrugged. "Kids are great. I was raised by a single dad myself, so I have a soft spot for father-daughter relationships." This small revelation shifted something in my perception of him. I had assumed he was just another elite professional like the men Rachel usually dated, but there seemed to be more depth to him. The rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding further cemented this impression. While my family continued their usual dynamic, Brandon's family was refreshingly different. His father, a retired firefighter who had raised Brandon alone after his mother died, treated me like an equal, asking thoughtful questions about my construction work and praising Emma's behavior. "You've done a good job with her," he said, watching Emma carefully follow the wedding planner's instructions for the processional. "Being a single dad isn't easy. I know that firsthand." His simple acknowledgement of my efforts meant more than he could know, especially in contrast to my own family's persistent criticism. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that the wedding might not be as unbearable as I had feared. Maybe Brandon's influence would temper Rachel's attitude, and his family's presence would dilute my parents' judgment. That hope was tempered by my sister's behavior at the end of the rehearsal when she pulled me aside, her smile tight. "Just remember, tomorrow is my day. Try not to draw attention to yourself, and make sure Emma behaves perfectly. I'm trusting you not to ruin this for me." As I drove back to our hotel room, Emma chattering excitedly about her flower girl duties, I felt the familiar knot of anxiety returning. Despite Brandon's unexpected kindness, I couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would test my patience and self-respect in ways I wasn't prepared for. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the hotel curtains I had forgotten to close completely. Emma was already awake, bouncing on her bed with excitement. "Daddy, is it time to get ready yet? When do I put on my dress? Will Aunt Rachel let me wear a little bit of makeup like the other flower girl?" I checked the clock, 7:30, with the ceremony not until 2 in the afternoon. "Plenty of time, pumpkin. Let's get some breakfast first, then we'll start getting ready." The hotel restaurant was filled with other wedding guests, all discussing the upcoming ceremony. I recognized a few of Rachel's friends from previous family gatherings, but none acknowledged us as Emma and I found a quiet table in the corner. I overheard snippets of conversations about the stunning venue and Rachel's incredible dress, reminders of the lavish event ahead. After breakfast, we returned to our room to begin the careful process of preparation. Emma's hair was a challenge, as the intricate half-up style the wedding planner had instructed would have been difficult for a professional, let alone a construction worker with calloused hands. After 30 minutes and several YouTube tutorials, I managed something presentable, securing it with the rhinestone clips Rachel had provided. Emma's excitement grew as I helped her into her dress, careful not to disturb her hair. "You look beautiful, Em," I said truthfully, my throat tightening at how grown-up she suddenly appeared. "Just like a princess." She twirled in front of the mirror, her face glowing. "Do you think Aunt Rachel will think I'm pretty?" "The prettiest flower girl ever," I assured her, though privately I wondered if Rachel would notice at all. My own preparation was simpler but no less nerve-wracking. I checked my appearance repeatedly, knowing any flaw would be ammunition for criticism. Finally satisfied that we both looked presentable, we headed to the venue an hour before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. The Grand Lake Resort was even more impressive up close, with manicured gardens stretching down to the waterfront and staff in formal uniforms directing guests. We were pointed toward a side building where the bridal party was gathering. Rachel was in full bride mode, surrounded by bridesmaids adjusting her veil, while she issued rapid-fire instructions to various wedding staff. When she spotted us, her expression flickered between annoyance and forced pleasure. "You're here. Good. Emma, the wedding planner needs to see you for final instructions. Jason." The family is sitting in the front row on the left. Not the very front, that's reserved for Mom, Dad, and Brandon's father, but the second row. "No greeting, no. Thank you for coming. Just logistics." I nodded, having expected nothing more, and gave Emma an encouraging smile as a harried-looking woman in a headset led her away to join the other flower girl. The ceremony space was elaborately decorated with thousands of white roses and crystal accents that caught the sunlight streaming through the windows. I found my assigned seat, awkwardly nodding to distant relatives who barely remembered me. My mother and father arrived shortly after, my mother elegant in an expensive-looking blue dress, my father uncomfortable in his tuxedo. "Jason." My mother acknowledged me with a slight nod. "I see you managed to arrive on time. Where's Emma?" "With the wedding planner, getting ready with the other flower girl," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. I do hope she remembers her instructions. Rachel has put so much into making this day perfect. The implication that Emma might somehow ruin things hung in the air. Before I could respond, music began, signaling the start of the ceremony. The processional was like something from a movie, each element perfectly choreographed. Brandon's groomsmen escorted the bridesmaids, all model attractive in matching attire. Then came the moment I was waiting for. Emma appeared at the entrance, basket in hand, looking suddenly shy at the sea of faces turned toward her. For a terrible moment, I feared she would freeze, but then she caught my eye. I gave her an encouraging smile and a subtle thumbs up. Her posture straightened, and she began walking carefully down the aisle, dropping rose petals at perfectly spaced intervals just as she had been instructed. Pride swelled in my chest as she completed her role flawlessly, taking her small seat next to the other flower girl without a single mistake. Several guests murmured appreciative comments about the adorable flower girls, and I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. The ceremony itself was expectedly lavish, with personal vows that made several guests reach for tissues. I noticed that while Rachel's vows focused on Brandon's accomplishments and how he complimented her perfect life plan, Brandon's contained a promise that caught my attention. "I vow to treat your family as my own, with respect and understanding, recognizing that family bonds are sacred and deserve nurturing." His eyes seemed to find mine for just a moment as he spoke these words, and I wondered if they were intended as reassurance. The thought was oddly comforting. After the ceremony came the cocktail hour, where guests mingled on the lakeside terrace while the wedding party took photos. I found Emma by the chocolate fountain, carefully dipping strawberries under the supervision of Brandon's father. "She's been telling me all about her art projects," he explained with a warm smile. "Sounds like you've got a real talent on your hands." "Thank you for watching her," I said, genuinely appreciative. He waved off my thanks. "Happy to. Brandon was always drawing at her age, too. Got him through some tough times after his mom passed." He lowered his voice. "Listen, Brandon told me a bit about your family situation. Just want you to know. Not everyone judges a man for raising his kid alone. Takes guts and heart." His kindness was unexpected and made the knot in my chest loosen slightly. As the cocktail hour continued, I made efforts to socialize, but it was clear I didn't fit seamlessly into either family. Rachel's college friends formed tight circles that didn't open to include me, and my mother's friends asked pointed questions about my interesting career choice, with barely concealed judgment. I overheard Rachel's bridesmaids Kimberly and Ashley whispering as I passed by the bar. "That's the brother, the construction worker with the kid. No wife, no degree. Total black sheep of the family," Kimberly murmured, not bothering to lower her voice enough. Ashley's responding giggle made my cheeks burn as I quickly moved away. The only genuine conversation I had was with Brandon's best man Michael, who approached me directly. "You're Jason, right? Brandon's mentioned you. Said you're in construction management." "That's cool. My company actually contracts with builders all the time, always looking for good supervisors." His easy manner and lack of condescension was refreshing. And we talked shop for several minutes before being interrupted by the announcement that dinner was about to be served. As guests moved toward the grand ballroom for the reception, I collected Emma from where she had been playing with Sophia, the other flower girl. "Having fun, Pumpkin?" She nodded enthusiastically. "Sophia's really nice, and Mr. Brandon's daddy gave me extra chocolate-covered pretzels. At least one of us was having a good time." I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the reception, where the real test of my patience would begin. The seating chart placed Emma and me at a table far from the main wedding party, with distant cousins and work colleagues who were clearly surprised to find themselves seated with the bride's brother. As the salads were served, I helped Emma navigate the multiple forks while trying to make polite conversation with table mates who were clearly more interested in the open bar than in getting to know us. The anxiety I had been managing all day began to build again as the time for speeches approached. After the main course was cleared, the master of ceremonies announced it was time for toasts. I tensed, knowing what was coming. These formal moments of family celebration had always highlighted my outsider status, and I had no reason to expect tonight would be different. My father went first, champagne flute in hand. His speech was brief and predictably focused on Rachel's achievements, with only a passing mention of Brandon. "From the day she was born, Rachel has exceeded every expectation. Her mother and I couldn't be prouder of the success she has created for herself, and now, the perfect match she has found in Brandon." The words, unlike some others, weren't spoken but seemed to hang in the air as his eyes briefly flicked toward me. Next came Kimberly, the maid of honor, who recounted stories from Rachel's college days and early career, emphasizing her drive and perfectionism. "Rachel has always known exactly what she wanted and how to get it," she concluded with a smile. "Whether it was the highest GPA, the corner office, or the perfect husband. Some of us," she added with a laugh and a meaningful glance around the room, "should take notes." Several more friends and relatives offered brief toasts, each emphasizing some aspect of Rachel's perfect life trajectory. I kept my expression neutral, occasionally helping Emma cut her cake or refill her water, grateful that at least no one had directly mentioned me. Just as I thought the speeches might be concluding, Rachel herself stood and took the microphone from the best man. This wasn't on the program, but the room quieted respectfully as she tapped her glass. "I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for coming today," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "Brandon and I are so blessed to have such wonderful friends and family to share this special day with us." She continued with the expected thanks to her parents, the wedding party, and various people who had contributed to the event. Her tone was warm and gracious, exactly what one would expect from a bride's speech. Then, with a slight shift in her posture, she turned toward my table. "I also want to acknowledge my brother Jason, who managed to make it today." There was a subtle emphasis on managed that immediately set my nerves on edge. "It's not easy for him to attend formal events, given his situation." A confused murmur rippled through the guests who didn't know me. Rachel continued, her smile not reaching her eyes. "For those who don't know, my brother is raising his daughter alone after his wife decided parenting wasn't for her. It's been, 5 years now?" 7, I corrected quietly, though no one heard me. "It's just been so hard for him to find someone willing to take on a ready-made family. My sister is a single mother, unwanted by anyone." She delivered this with a small laugh, as if sharing an inside joke. The room's reaction was mixed. Some guests shifted uncomfortably, while others, particularly Rachel's college friends, laughed openly. Emma looked up at me, confusion in her eyes as she sensed the undercurrent without fully understanding it. Before I could decide how to respond, my mother stood from her seat at the head table, swaying slightly from the multiple glasses of champagne she had consumed. "It's true," she added, taking the microphone from Rachel. "She's a used product." This time the laughter was louder, emboldened by my mother's participation. I felt the blood drain from my face as Emma's confusion turned to understanding, her small face crumpling as she realized they were laughing at us. "Daddy?" she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Why are they being mean?" The sight of her pain sparked something fierce in me. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. The movement drew all eyes to me, and the laughter gradually died down, replaced by uncomfortable silence as guests registered my expression. "Emma, let's go," I said quietly, taking her hand. She was fully crying now, silent tears streaming down her face as she clutched her napkin in a small fist. I felt hollowed out, a lifetime of accumulated hurt and anger churning beneath a thin veneer of dignity I was struggling to maintain. All I wanted was to get Emma away from these people who could so casually cause her pain for a moment's entertainment. As we stood to leave, I caught a glimpse of the head table. Rachel looked surprised, as if she hadn't expected me to react at all. My mother was whispering something to my father, who looked uncomfortable but remained silent as always. And Brandon. Brandon's expression had transformed from shock to something harder, his jaw set in a rigid line as he looked from his new wife to my tearful daughter. We had made it halfway to the exit when his voice cut through the awkward silence that had fallen over the ballroom. "Wait." The command was quiet but carried such authority that the entire room froze. I turned slowly, Emma's hand still clutched in mine, to see Brandon standing, his expression unreadable. He walked deliberately to the center of the room where the microphone stand was positioned, every eye following his movement. The silence was absolute as he adjusted the microphone, the small electronic feedback seeming unnaturally loud. "I need to say something," he began, his voice steady and clear. He looked around the room, making eye contact with various guests before his gaze settled on Rachel and my mother at the head table. "What just happened was unacceptable." Rachel's smile faltered. "Brandon, it was just a joke. Jason knows we tease him." Brandon shook his head firmly. "No. That wasn't teasing. That was cruel, and I won't pretend otherwise, especially not on my wedding day." He turned to face Emma and me directly. "Jason, Emma, please don't leave. What was said does not reflect my values or what I believe family should be." Taking a deep breath, he continued. "What many of you don't know is that I was raised by a single father. He gestured toward his dad, who nodded encouragingly. My mother died when I was 6. And my father devoted his life to raising me alone. It wasn't easy for either of us, but his sacrifice and love made me the man I am today. The revelation seemed to ripple through the room. Guests exchanging surprised glances. Brandon's voice grew stronger. So when I hear someone mock a parent for raising their child alone, when I hear terms like unwanted or used product applied to a family that has overcome abandonment and loss, I cannot and will not stay silent. Even if those words come from my new wife and mother-in-law. Rachel's face had gone from confused to angry, her cheeks flushing red as she realized Brandon was publicly challenging her. My mother looked mortified, attempting to maintain a social smile while clearly seething underneath. Jason, Brandon continued, looking directly at me. From what I've observed, you are an exceptional father. Emma is kind, well-mannered, and clearly loved. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens through dedication and sacrifice, qualities that deserve respect, not ridicule. Emma's grip on my hand loosened slightly as she looked up at Brandon with wide eyes, her tears slowing. And Emma, he said, his voice gentling, you should be very proud of your dad. He's doing one of the hardest jobs in the world, and doing it well. Never let anyone make you feel less than the wonderful girl you are. Brandon turned back to address the entire room. I believe families should lift each other up, not tear each other down. I believe in celebrating strengths rather than mocking perceived weaknesses. And I believe that a man who devotes his life to raising his child deserves admiration, not derision. The silence in the room was thick with tension. Then, from the back, someone began to applaud. It was Brandon's father, standing tall with obvious pride in his son. The applause spread slowly at first, then more rapidly as other guests joined in. Many looking relieved that someone had addressed the uncomfortable situation. Brandon held up his hand, quieting the applause. Jason, Emma, I'd be honored if you would join us at the head table for the remainder of the reception. There are 2 empty seats beside my father. Rachel stood abruptly. Brandon, you're embarrassing me at my own wedding, she hissed, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. No, Rachel, he replied calmly. You embarrass yourself when you chose to mock your brother and niece for a cheap laugh. I'm simply attempting to right a wrong. My Uncle Thomas, who had been seated at a table near the back, stood and walked over to us. Jason, Emma, let me walk with you, he said, placing a supportive hand on my shoulder. The simple gesture of solidarity nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. As we made our way to the head table, guided by Uncle Thomas and watched by every person in the room, I noticed several guests nodding approvingly. Brandon's groomsmen made a point of standing to welcome us, and Michael pulled out Emma's chair with an exaggerated bow that made her giggle despite her tear-stained cheeks. Brandon's father leaned over immediately. He gets that from me, you know. Can't stand bullies, never could. Nearly got expelled in 3rd grade for decking a kid who was picking on a classmate. His casual conversation created a bubble of normalcy in the surreal situation. Rachel remained standing, her expression a battlefield of emotions as she watched her new husband publicly contradict her. After a moment of visible indecision, she sat down stiffly, whispering furiously to her mother. I helped Emma into her seat, still processing what had just happened. Brandon had not only defended us but had done so in a way that shifted the entire room's perception. Where moments before Emma and I had been objects of ridicule, we were now receiving sympathetic glances and supportive smiles from people who had laughed along with Rachel minutes earlier. As dinner service resumed, the band began playing again, creating a welcome background noise that allowed conversations to restart. Brandon made a point of sitting beside me once he had finished making rounds to other tables. I meant every word, he said quietly. My dad raised me alone from 1st grade through college. Hardest working man I've ever known. Taught me that real strength isn't about titles or bank accounts, it's about showing up every day for the people who depend on you. I struggled to find adequate words. Thank you doesn't seem enough. Brandon shook his head. No thanks needed. I should be apologizing to you. I knew Rachel could be judgmental, but I didn't realize how deeply it ran in the family. I should have seen it earlier and addressed it privately before it came to this. How did you not know? I couldn't help asking. This has been their attitude toward me since Emma was born. Brandon looked genuinely surprised. Rachel rarely mentioned you, honestly. When she did, she painted a picture of a brother who was struggling but too proud to accept help. I had no idea they actively belittled you. He glanced toward his new wife, who was now putting on a show of gracious smiles for nearby guests while pointedly ignoring our table. It makes me question how well I know her. This vulnerable admission from a man I barely knew created an unexpected connection. Marriage has a way of not sure if I was trying to comfort him or warn him. That it does, he agreed, his expression thoughtful. Listen, I want Emma to enjoy the rest of the evening. The DJ is starting soon, and I made sure he has some kid-friendly songs queued up. Would she like to dance with the other children? Emma, who had been quietly eating her cake while leaning against my side, perked up at this. Can I, Daddy? Sophia said there's going to be a dance contest. Seeing her resilience, her ability to bounce back from hurt with the natural elasticity of childhood, filled me with fierce love. Of course, Pumpkin. Just stay where I can see you, okay? As Emma skipped off to join the other children gathering near the dance floor, I felt some of the tension leave my body. The evening had taken an unexpected turn, but somehow, we had emerged not as victims but as people worthy of respect. The reception continued with a strange undercurrent of tension beneath the celebratory surface. The dance floor filled as the DJ played upbeat music, creating a welcome distraction from the earlier drama. Brandon stayed at our table for most of the dinner, engaging me in conversation about my work and Emma's interests, making a pointed effort to demonstrate his sincerity. Emma mentioned she loves art, he said, watching as she twirled on the dance floor with the other children. There's a great weekend program at the Community Arts Center downtown. One of my clients is on their board. I could get you some information if you're interested. She would love that, I replied, still slightly disoriented by this unexpected ally. Her school had to cut their art program due to budget issues. She was devastated. Brandon shook his head. That's happening everywhere. My foundation does some work with underserved schools, trying to keep arts education available. Maybe we could talk about getting your daughter's school on the list for next year's grants. Your foundation? I asked, realizing how little I knew about this man who had just married my sister. He smiled self-deprecatingly. Nothing grand. Just a non-profit I started with my first big bonus. My dad worked 2 jobs to pay for my piano lessons after Mom died because music was the only thing that helped me process my grief. I never forgot what that meant to me. Our conversation was interrupted when Rachel finally approached our table, her smile fixed and professional as she touched Brandon's shoulder. Darling, we should cut the cake soon. The photographer says the lighting is perfect right now. Brandon covered her hand with his own. Of course. Rachel, have you had a chance to really talk with your brother tonight? Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. We can catch up with Jason later. Right now, we have a schedule to keep. As Brandon stood to follow her, he gave me an apologetic look. We'll continue this conversation. Once they moved away, Brandon's father leaned closer. She's got a shock coming if she thinks she can manage my son like one of her marketing campaigns, he commented wryly. Brandon's easygoing until his principles are crossed. Then he's immovable. The cake cutting proceeded with picture-perfect smiles, though I noticed the careful distance Brandon maintained from Rachel, the way their interactions seemed choreographed rather than natural. The guests, most unaware of the undercurrents, cheered and applauded appropriately. As the evening progressed, I was surprised by how many people approached me, often beginning with awkward apologies. I want you to know I wasn't laughing, insisted a cousin I barely remembered. I have a friend who's a single dad. Hardest working guy I know. Michael. Brandon's best man, was more direct. That was messed up, what happened. For what it's worth, Brandon was furious. I've known him since college, and I've never seen him that angry. Even my father eventually made his way to our table, looking uncomfortable but determined. He sat heavily in the chair beside me, watching Emma dance for a moment before speaking. Your mother had too much champagne, he began, his standard excuse for her behavior. That doesn't make what she said okay, Dad, I replied, too emotionally drained to pretend otherwise. He sighed deeply, suddenly looking older than his 60 years. No, it doesn't. Neither does what Rachel said. He paused, struggling visibly. You've done well with Emma. Better than I gave you credit for. Coming from my father, this qualified as an effusive apology. I nodded, acknowledging his effort while recognizing its limitations. Thanks for saying that. Brandon seems like a good man, he added, glancing toward where my new brother-in-law was fulfilling his hosting duties. Better than I expected for Rachel, if I'm honest. She's always chosen men who... He trailed off, perhaps realizing he was about to criticize his golden child. Who are like her, I suggested. He almost smiled. Something like that. He stood, patting my shoulder awkwardly. Your mother and I are leaving soon. She's not feeling well. Translation: she was too embarrassed or angry to face me after Brandon's intervention. I understand. Drive safely. After he left, Uncle Thomas took the vacated seat. Well, that was more drama than I expected from Rachel's wedding. Though knowing your sister, perhaps I should have placed bets. His matter-of-fact tone made me laugh despite everything. Not exactly how I pictured the evening going either. Brandon surprised me, Thomas admitted. Figured he was just another stuffed shirt like the rest of Rachel's crowd. Turns out the man has a spine. And principles, I added. Watching as Brandon personally escorted an elderly guest to the dance floor, ensuring she felt included. Rare combination in his circles, Thomas agreed. He lowered his voice. Listen. I've been meaning to talk to you about work. I'm thinking of expanding the business, taking on more commercial projects. Could use a project manager I trust. Someone who knows the business from the ground up. I turned to him, surprised. Are you offering me a promotion? He shrugged. More like a partnership track position. You've earned it. And not because you're my nephew. You're good at what you do, Jason. Don't let your family make you forget that. Before I could respond, Emma ran up, breathless and flushed from dancing. Daddy? I won a prize in the dance contest. Look. She proudly displayed a small gift bag containing candy and a gift card to a local ice cream shop. That's fantastic, Pumpkin, I said. Genuinely happy to see her enjoying herself despite the earlier upset. As the evening wore on, I noticed Rachel making her way toward us, alone this time. Her expression was composed but tense as she approached our table. Jason, could we speak privately for a moment? She asked, her voice carefully modulated. I hesitated, looking toward Emma, who was happily showing Uncle Thomas her prize. I don't want to leave, Emma. It's fine, Thomas interjected. Emma and I were just about to check out the chocolate fountain again, weren't we, kiddo? Emma nodded enthusiastically, and I reluctantly agreed. Following Rachel to a quieter corner of the ballroom, she turned to face me, and I was struck by how perfectly she maintained her bridal appearance despite the evening's tensions. Not a hair out of place, makeup still flawless. Brandon suggested I owe you an apology, she began, her tone making it clear these weren't her own words. Suggested? I repeated. She sighed dramatically. Fine, he insisted. Look, I didn't mean to upset Emma. I was just trying to lighten the mood with a joke. A joke at our expense, I pointed out. About Emma being unwanted. About me being unwanted. You're being oversensitive, Rachel countered, her mask of contrition slipping. It's my wedding day, Jason. Couldn't you have just laughed it off instead of making a scene that required my husband to humiliate me in front of everyone? I stared at her, truly seeing her perhaps for the first time. Do you actually believe what you're saying? That I'm the one who made a scene, not you and Mom publicly mocking your 7-year-old niece? Rachel's expression hardened. You've always played the victim, Jason. Poor Jason, with his average grades. Poor Jason, with his manual labor job. Poor Jason, abandoned by his wife. Some of us work hard for what we have instead of expecting sympathy. The cruelty of her words should have hurt, but instead, I felt an odd sense of clarity. You really don't get it, do you? I'm not playing a victim, Rachel. I'm living my life the best way I know how, raising my daughter, doing honest work I'm good at. The only people who see that as something to mock are you and Mom. Brandon doesn't understand our family dynamic, she insisted. He overreacted. No, Rachel. He reacted like a decent human being. I sighed, suddenly tired of the conversation. Of the years of judgment and criticism. I think Brandon understands more than you realize. And I think you're lucky he's willing to overlook this side of you. Rachel's face flushed with anger. Are you implying I don't deserve him? I'm saying he seems like someone who values kindness and family loyalty. If those are important to him, then yes, you might have a problem. I spotted Brandon watching us from across the room, his concern evident. Your husband is waiting for you. It's your wedding day, as you pointed out. Maybe focus on that instead of defending your right to be cruel. I walked away before she could respond, returning to where Emma was chattering happily with Uncle Thomas. Her earlier tears forgotten with the resilience of childhood. Brandon intercepted me halfway there. Everything okay? He asked quietly. As okay as it can be, I replied honestly. Rachel and I have a lot of history. One wedding day revelation isn't going to fix that. Brandon nodded thoughtfully. For what it's worth, I think she's capable of better. I wouldn't have married her if I didn't. He hesitated, then added, I'd like to get to know my niece better, if that's okay with you. Maybe you two could come to the city sometime after we're back from the honeymoon. I could show Emma the Natural History Museum. They have a great children's art program on Saturdays. His genuine interest in maintaining a relationship despite the evening's tensions surprised me. She'd like that. She's been begging to see the dinosaur exhibit. It's settled then, he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I realized he was making a choice, actively deciding to build a bridge that Rachel might prefer burned. It couldn't be easy. Beginning his marriage was such a clear division between his values and his wife's behavior. As the reception began winding down, Emma's energy finally flagged. Her eyes growing heavy despite her determination to stay until the very end. I decided it was time to leave. Collecting our things and making quiet goodbyes to those who had shown us kindness throughout the evening. Brandon's father insisted on walking us to our car, carrying a sleeping Emma so I could manage our bags. Kids this age, they just crash when they're done, don't they? He observed with the knowing tone of experience. Brandon was the same way. Full speed until suddenly, boom, out like a light. As I carefully buckled Emma into her booster seat, he added, I meant to say earlier, if you ever need anything, advice or just someone to talk to who gets it, Brandon has my number. He can pass it along. This simple offer of connection from someone who understood the unique challenges of solo parenting meant more than any of the awkward apologies I'd received throughout the evening. I appreciate that, sir. Jack, he corrected with a wink. Sir makes me feel like my father. As we drove away from the venue, Emma briefly stirred. Daddy? Is Uncle Brandon mad at Aunt Rachel? I considered how to answer. I think he was disappointed in how she acted, honey. Sometimes when people we care about don't behave well, we need to let them know. She nodded sleepily. He was nice. He said I draw good and that you're a good daddy. He seems like a good man. I agreed, watching her drift back to sleep in the rearview mirror. Driving through the quiet night. I reflected on the unexpected turns the day had taken. What had begun as an exercise in endurance, in protecting Emma from my family's judgment, while maintaining a fragile peace, had transformed into something else entirely. In the most unlikely setting, we had found unexpected allies and a glimmer of what family support could actually feel like. The days following the wedding were strangely quiet. I had expected immediate fallout, angry calls from my mother or passive-aggressive texts from Rachel, but there was only silence. Emma, with the remarkable adaptability of children, seemed to have processed the events at the reception and moved on, talking mostly about the dancing and cake rather than the painful moments. 3 days after we returned home, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. It was Brandon, calling from his honeymoon in Bali. "Hope it's not weird that I'm calling," he began, the international connection creating a slight delay. "Just wanted to check how you and Emma are doing." "We're fine," I assured him, genuinely touched by his concern. "Emma's already asking when she can see the dinosaurs at the museum." Brandon laughed. "That can definitely be arranged once we're back. Listen, I also wanted you to know. Things are a bit tense with Rachel right now. She feels I embarrassed her at the wedding." "I can imagine," I replied, unsure what else to say. "I don't regret what I did," he continued firmly. "But I want you to know that I'm working on helping her see things differently. She's not a bad person, Jason. She absorbed some toxic attitudes from your mother. And no one ever challenged her on them before." His defense of Rachel was unexpected but spoke volumes about his character. "I hope you can get through to her. For what it's worth, I've never wanted a bad relationship with my sister. It just sort of evolved that way." "I know," Brandon said. "That's why I'm determined to help change things. Family is too important to write off. But it's also too important to let toxic behaviors continue unchecked." The line crackled with static. "I should go before we lose connection. But one more thing, I gave your contact info to my dad. Hope that's okay. He mentioned wanting to invite you and Emma fishing at his lake house sometime." After we hung up, I sat in quiet contemplation. Brandon's commitment to improving family dynamics rather than simply taking sides was admirable, even if I was skeptical about Rachel's capacity for change. The following weekend, Emma and I were surprised by a visit from Uncle Thomas, who brought news that he had secured a commercial contract for a new office building downtown. "It's official," he announced as Emma showed him her latest art project. "I need that project manager I mentioned. Position comes with a significant raise and some actual regular hours. What do you say?" The opportunity was exactly what we needed, a chance to improve our financial situation while maintaining the work I enjoyed. I say yes, obviously. "Thank you, Thomas." He waved off my thanks. "Pure self-interest. You're the best person for the job. Oh, and the company will cover some continuing education if you want to get additional certifications. Thought you might be interested." 2 weeks after the wedding, my mother finally called. Her voice was stiff with forced politeness. "Jason, I wanted to, that is, your father thought I should." "About what happened at the wedding?" I waited, giving her space to actually apologize if she could manage it. After an uncomfortable silence, she continued. "I may have had too much champagne and spoken inappropriately. It wasn't my intention to upset Emma. It wasn't exactly a heartfelt apology, but coming from my mother, it was unprecedented. I appreciate you calling, Mom. Emma's okay now, but she was really hurt in the moment." "Well, children are resilient," she replied, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. "Anyway, your father and I would like to have you both over for dinner next Sunday. Rachel and Brandon will be back from their honeymoon by then." I hesitated, weighing the potential for more conflict against the small step my mother had taken by calling. "Let me check our schedule and get back to you," I said finally, unwilling to commit immediately. Later that week, I received an unexpected invitation to join a support group for single parents that met at the local community center. The email came from Jack, Brandon's father, who mentioned he had been a member years ago and still kept in touch with the facilitator. "Thought you might be interested," he wrote. "Helped me a lot when Brandon was younger." Sometimes just knowing you're not alone in the challenges makes them easier to face. I decided to give it a try and found myself in a church basement the following Tuesday evening, surrounded by other parents navigating the complicated waters of raising children alone. To my surprise, nearly half the group was fathers. Men of various ages and backgrounds united by their commitment to their children. The facilitator, a warm woman named Dorothy who had raised 3 children alone after her husband's death, created a space where vulnerability wasn't just accepted but valued. When it was my turn to introduce myself, I found myself sharing not just the basics but the deeper struggles, the isolation, the financial worries, the fear of somehow damaging Emma by not being enough. "You're enough," said a father named Marcus who had custody of his 12-year-old twin boys. "The fact that you worry about it proves that. The ones who damage their kids are the ones who never question themselves." After the meeting, several of the dads invited me to join them for coffee, an impromptu tradition that had evolved over months of meetings. Sitting in the local diner, listening to them swap stories about science project disasters and first date anxieties, I felt a sense of community I hadn't realized I was missing. 3 weeks after the wedding, we finally accepted my parents' dinner invitation. Emma was excited to see her grandparents, and I decided that giving them a chance to improve our relationship was worth the risk of disappointment. To my surprise, the evening was different from our usual family gatherings. My father made a point of asking Emma about school and showing genuine interest in her answers. My mother, while not exactly warm, refrained from her usual critical comments and had even prepared Emma's favorite dessert. Rachel and Brandon arrived late, having come directly from the airport after their honeymoon. The changes in their dynamic were subtle but noticeable. Rachel seemed more subdued, less performative in her perfection. Brandon was attentive but firm, gently redirecting conversations when they veered toward comparison or judgment. After dinner, while the others were distracted with coffee and dessert, Rachel pulled me aside to the kitchen. "Brandon's been talking to me," she began without preamble, "about how we were raised, about Mom's favoritism, about how I've treated you over the years." I waited, unsure where this was heading. "I'm not good at this," she admitted, staring at the counter rather than meeting my eyes. "At admitting I might have been unkind." "That's an understatement," I replied, not harshly but not willing to minimize years of behavior either. She nodded reluctantly. "Fair enough. Look, I'm trying to understand. Brandon says I've been so focused on external validation that I lost sight of what actually matters. He says." She hesitated. "He says I've been cruel to make myself feel superior, and that it's a reflection of my insecurity, not your worth." It was perhaps the most self-aware thing I'd ever heard my sister say. "And what do you think?" She sighed, finally looking at me. "I think he might be right. I don't know how to fix everything overnight, Jason. I'm not even sure I know how to be different after all these years. But I'm willing to try. For Brandon and maybe for us too." It wasn't a perfect apology, still centered partly on her relationship with Brandon rather than genuine remorse, but it was a start. "I'd like that, Rachel. For Emma's sake. And maybe for ours too." In the months that followed, small changes accumulated into meaningful shifts. Brandon and Jack became regular presences in our lives, with Emma developing a special bond with her Grandpa Jack, who taught her to fish and encouraged her artistic talents. My promotion at work eased our financial strain, allowing me to enroll Emma in the art program Brandon had recommended. The support group became an important part of my routine, providing not just practical advice but genuine friendship. I found myself becoming more confident as a parent and more open to the possibility of dating again, though I was in no rush. Rachel's efforts to change were inconsistent but genuine. Some weeks she would call just to check in, making a visible effort to ask about our lives without judgment. Other times, old patterns would emerge, and she would catch herself mid-sentence, apologizing for the slip. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. My relationship with my parents remained more formal, particularly with my mother, whose deeply ingrained behaviors proved the most resistant to change. But even she made efforts, sending Emma thoughtful birthday gifts and occasionally asking my opinion on matters where my experience might be valuable. As Emma's 8th birthday approached, I found myself reflecting on how much had changed since that wedding day. What had begun as a painful public humiliation had somehow become a catalyst for healing and growth. The family dynamics that had seemed permanently fixed had proven capable of evolution, not through dramatic confrontation but through consistent, small choices toward kindness and understanding. On the morning of Emma's birthday, as I watched her excitedly opening presents before school, I was struck by her resilience and joy. Her ability to embrace love wherever she found it without dwelling on past hurts. Children, I realized, were not just recipients of our care but teachers of how to live, if we were wise enough to learn from them. That evening, surrounded by Emma's friends from school, members of our newly expanded family circle, and the community we had built, I felt a contentment I hadn't thought possible a year earlier. Brandon caught my eye across the room and raised his cup in a small toast, acknowledging the journey without need for words. Family, I had learned, was not just the one you were born into but the one you created through choice and commitment. It could be a source of both deep wounds and profound healing. The true measure of family was not in perfect harmony but in the willingness to grow, to forgive, and to begin again when necessary. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone unexpectedly stood up for you? Or have you been the one to stand up against family members when they crossed the line? Share your story in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply refuse to be silent in the face of cruelty. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they are not alone. Thank you for joining me today, and remember that family is not just about blood, but about who shows up for you when it matters most.